Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be looking at the Excel DGET function. This is a very sort of little known function available in Excel which allows us to do return values. So it's almost maybe one better than the VLOOKUP and index match functions that we looked before. So it's very much in that sort of lookup function group. And like I say, it's a little known function to get used, but it's highly powerful. So we're going to step through that function, how it works, and then we'll jump into Excel as always to go through examples of using the function. So first of all, the purpose of using the DGET function is to get a value from a matching record. The function is made up of three parts. You have database, field, and criteria. So this function is from the Excel database functions available to us. I guess this function was probably surpassed when we had the later functions available to us in Excel, but nonetheless it's still got a real powerful use, and it's one that you could really use and probably solve a number of questions, especially when you get into the realms of wanting to do a VLOOKUP but with multiple criteria. This could potentially be the function for you. So the first one is database. So this is the database range, including headers. But in essence, this is just the range containing your data that has the values that you want to find and return. Number two is the field. So this is the field name or index to count, but more simply put, this is where your value resides that you want to return. So in terms of VLOOKUP, this would be like the index number, so where you identify the column in which or the column number that you want to return a value from. And then number three is just the criteria, so the criteria range including headers. So the criteria being what criteria do you want to apply to the database range in order to return a value. And then at the bottom there you can see the function in its entirety. So it's quite a short little function of the three parts. It's equals DGET, and then you've got the database followed by the field, and lastly the criteria. So without sort of going too much into that or cause any confusion, we'll jump across to Excel and go through some examples because it's a lot easier way to get this function across. Okay, so you now join us in the Excel application, and we have our example that we're going to work through. So what we have is we've got our range of data here, which will form our database in terms of our function, and it just has some ID numbers, and it's looking at total sales. So it's total sales per day, and you can see that each of those is mapped to a month, and each has got an ID number as well. So what we're going to do is use our DGET function in order to return a value that matches our criteria, where the month is February and the day is Monday. Because obviously, as you can see, there's multiple different Mondays in our column D, but obviously they coincide with a different month. So our criteria is we want to find out what the total sales was for Monday that was in February. So to do this, all we need to do is enter our DGET function and open brackets, and then we've got our prompt there to tell us the different arguments. So database is just our full range of data, so we just select that like this. Or what you could do as well is if your data, your header started in the first row and you had a lot more data on here, you could just select the columns as a whole, but for us we've just selected that defined range there. So for fields, you have three different ways you can input this information. You could either do it as an index number, so you put in the actual number which represents the column from within your database that contains the value you wish to return. Alternatively, you can put in here the type it in manually, so within quotations you could type in the field name or the column header. So for us you could type in here total sales within quotations. Or the third and final option, which we're going to be using here, is to simply select the column header from our summary table. So as we sort of skipped over it, but what we've got here is this little summary table here is using the same headers that we've got in our database, but obviously pre-populated, so we can reference that to define the column in which the value sits we want to return. The other benefit of doing this as well is if you then change and you want to actually pull a different column from within your database, then it makes it easier that you can just manually or update the column header in the summary table, and that will therefore feed through to the DGET function. So we've entered our reference of J5 for our field. We can then move on to the last part, that is criteria. So the criteria is really easy to enter, and it works on the basis where you have two pieces of information per piece of criteria. So the first will be the column header or the field that you wish to apply criteria to, and then the second part is the criteria you wish to apply. So for us, we have two pieces of criteria, the month and day. So what we need to do is we need to select the range of H5 to I6. And the reason for that is because the first piece of criteria is the month, and then beneath that is the criteria we wish to apply to that column. And then the second one is obviously our second piece of criteria, which is day, or that's the second field we wish to apply criteria to, and Monday is the criteria we want to apply to that. So all you need to do is just select as much, so if you had three pieces here, you just need to make sure you've got the column headers and then the row beneath what tells the piece of criteria you wish to apply to that field. So having entered I'll close brackets, that is our complete formula, and you can just see that here in this sort of yellow highlight, or obviously in our formula bar at the top here for your reference. Once done, all you need to do is hit enter, and you can see we've got a value returned. And we can now manually check that by finding February in our months, locating Monday day, and we can see that we successfully brought back the £215. Benefit of this as well is if we now change our month, we could change this to March, hit enter, and we can see that March Monday was indeed 3:30. So our function is working very well and dynamically as well. The other benefit of using this function, so in our example there, we returned a value that was to the left of our criteria, and by that we mean the month and day. But the benefit of this is we're not limited to a particular direction. We're able to also go to the left of the criteria as well. So to just change the formatting here, let's just go back to a number, and just going to change this because I don't like having decimal places on number, funny like that. Well, for this scenario anyway. So we just got rid of the pound sign. You can see we now have just 330. If I was to change this to ID, and as you can see in our example, ID is the very first column in our database, and it is to the left of our criteria. If I change this to ID, our function will now say, okay, they actually want to pull a different field, therefore it will go and pull that information. So upon hitting enter, you can see that our function now knows it needs to pull from a different column or field reference, and it gives us now the return value of 107. And we can see from a manual check that if you find March and Monday, what's here, just highlighted, that 107 is the ID that corresponds with those two pieces of criteria. So there you go, that is our look at the DGET function. It's a very, very straightforward function to use once you get the hang of it, and it is also one of those ones that adds to our ever-growing list of functions that are potentially better than using the VLOOKUP. So I guess in summary, VLOOKUP is great if we've got a simple value or single piece of criteria and the value we wish to return is to the right hand side of our search value. We then have index match, where we want to get a bit more dynamic than VLOOKUP and maybe return values to the left of our search criteria or make it dynamic in a number of ways. But DGET actually does the same functionality as index by being very dynamic in all directions it pulls, but actually it's a bit more simpler function to get the hang of, and it's just a really powerful one to use indeed. So what we'll do is we'll be uploading this document to our website, and the link to download this document will be in the description for the video just below. So if you want to get hold of that, just go down into the description of this video, click the link, and that will download for you. If you haven't done already, please do subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated, and if you want to be notified, make sure you hit that bell notification button so that YouTube notifies you when we have new videos uploaded. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.